Hello, welcome to the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame induction ceremony, posthumously honoring Byron Herbert Shaw. I'm Patty Dreyer, immediate past president of the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Foundation, and I'll be your MC today. We have pre-recorded some parts of this event, but we'll host a live interview with our inductees' family as a special feature. I'm located in Stevens Point, the heart of Wisconsin, at Schmeeckley Reserve Visitor Center on the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point campus, my alma mater. We're pleased to have you join us today and are grateful for the technology that makes it possible for us to be together. After this induction ceremony today, you will see that the impact of Byron Shaw's scientific work and legacy is alive and very well today, though Byron passed in 2016. Motivated by strong environmental and civic ethics, Byron made and communicated new scientific discoveries that influenced policy and law in our state. Few scientists have contributed more to the fundamental body of knowledge about water quality than Byron Shaw. Before we delve deeper into Byron's story, let's thank our event sponsors. At the double platinum level, we have Helen Johnson Leopold and Craig Leopold. Platinum sponsors include Trout Unlimited, United States Forest Service in the Department of Agriculture, the David H. Smith Conservation Research Fellowship Program, also known as the Smith Fellows. Silver sponsors include the Aldo Leopold Foundation, Ice Age Trail Alliance, Joanne M. and Richard C. Hemp, Stephen Bourne, Madison Audubon, Friends of Wisconsin Ducks Unlimited, Tim and Linda Isley, Kathleen Falk and Peter Bach, the Columbia Marquette chapter of Pheasants Forever, Inc. in Wisconsin, and our bronze sponsors include Peter McKeever, Door County Land Trust, Todd Ames, Paul DeLong, Wisconsin Society for Ornithology, Brent Hagelin, Tom and Mary John Hauge, Wisconsin Wildlife Federation, the Society of American Foresters, and in-kind contributions come from the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point. Let me share how this event will flow. We will feature two speakers sharing highlights of Byron's career in two presentations, and we'll honor Byron with an official recognition from the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Foundation, as well as an official legislative citation from the state of Wisconsin. Then I will conduct a live interview with Byron's wife, Margaret, and his sons, Jeff and Dan. This will give you a chance to hear firsthand about Byron's incredible story and inspiration. We'll close the event with Byron's video montage from the opening of the ceremony. We knew you would want to watch it again. And we'll also turn on the live chat feature so attendees at this induction ceremony today may share thoughts, memories, and gratitude with Byron's family. This is our way to host a reception line so that you can offer your personal notes and congratulations. We'll record those thoughts from you and send them in a written package to Margaret so she and her family won't miss any of them. Are you ready? Then let's get started sharing some background on the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame and the induction process.
The Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Foundation was created in 1984 to encourage the growth and practice of a conservation ethic as a legacy for the people of Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame is a nonprofit organization guided by a board of directors. Voting member organizations represent more than 30 conservation organizations from around Wisconsin. Each year, the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame inducts up to 3 people into the Hall of Fame. To date, there are over 100 inductees who have been honored. You can learn about each of these conservation champions on the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame website or by visiting the Hall of Fame Gallery. The Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Gallery of Inductees is located in beautiful Schmeeckley Reserve, which is a natural area on the campus of the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, with 5 miles of nature trails and wildlife viewing opportunities. Inside the Schmeeckley Reserve Visitor Center, guests can view engraved wooden plaques about inductees with quotes highlighting their contributions. A touchscreen computer gives visitors a chance to connect with Wisconsin's conservation heritage as they browse the stories and learn about the achievements of each inductee. Any person or organization can nominate someone for induction into the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. Nominees have an array of environmental and conservation-related backgrounds and varying types of education and experience. From writers to artists, from educators to policymakers, from researchers to managers, Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame heroes come from all backgrounds and walks of life. Based on standards and criteria set by the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Board of Directors, all inductees must have significant ties to Wisconsin, and their contributions must have wide-reaching impact, affecting a range of natural resources. Each summer, a 5-member Board of Governors reviews nominations. The highly esteemed governors are an independent body and have in-depth knowledge of Wisconsin's conservation history. The governors select 5 nominations to forward to the Board of Directors and voting member organizations for their consideration. The board members and organization representatives select the following year's inductees from that list of finalists at their annual fall meeting. While voting membership in the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame is only open to organizational members of the foundation, individuals may participate in the mission by providing annual support as affiliate members. The financial support of member organizations and affiliate members allows the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame to celebrate, advance, and share Wisconsin's conservation legacy as it hosts induction ceremonies and maintains inductee archives. We invite you to learn more about the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame and Wisconsin's conservation heritage by visiting our website at WCHF.org.
Let me introduce you to our first speaker, Dick Stevens. Dick is a colleague and friend of Byron Shaw and former lab manager of the inorganic section of the Environmental Task Force Lab at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. The lab is now known as WHEEL, short for Water and Environmental Analysis Lab.
It's an honor for me to be here today to talk about Byron's many accomplishments. During his tenure at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, Byron clearly touched the lives of scores of graduate students and hundreds of undergraduate students, many of whom went on to distinguished careers of their own. Byron's great concern for the environment and years of research to identify and remediate sources of soil and water pollution also significantly benefited our natural resources and the citizens of the state who rely on these resources for work, recreation, and clean drinking water. In 1968, Byron graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison with a PhD in water and soil science, and was hired as an assistant professor to teach in the College of Natural Resources at the University of Stevens Point that same year. I was a student in Byron's first water chemistry class, which turned out to be the beginning of a relationship that would span almost 50 years and include Byron as a mentor, a colleague, and a friend. My first impression of Byron was that he looked very young, and I wondered if he was a professor or a student. Well, after a rather intense review of relevant chemistry and a lecture on what he expected from us during the semester, there was no doubt he was a professor. After class, it was clear that some felt that they had stumbled into a course with too high of expectations, but I think everyone stayed the course and never regretted a second of it. Byron opened our eyes to the many factors affecting our water resources. He taught the interconnectedness of groundwater and surface water, how to test for many naturally occurring constituents of water, along with some pollutants, and how to interpret the data. He made it interesting and relevant and was always very approachable, and he treated students in a way that showed that he cared about them. In 1972, Byron was awarded a legislative grant to start the Environmental Task Force program. The ETF lab was charged with investigating and solving soil and water-related problems in the tradition of the Wisconsin idea, a concept that brings the knowledge and research capabilities of the university system to all the citizens of the state. The lab also acted as a hands-on teaching facility for training students to become water quality professionals. The grant afforded basic laboratory equipment, a truck, a boat and trailer, a drilling rig for soil sampling and monitoring well installation, a motorhome, which was converted to a mobile water lab, and some basic field sampling equipment, and money to hire a laboratory technician. The university gave Byron a small lab space. It was an old home economics kitchen in the basement of Old Main, and he wasted no time getting started. He hired a laboratory technician, and with the help of graduate students and undergrad students, began monthly sampling of surface water and lakes and streams in Portage County. Based on concerns from county health officials, he also initiated groundwater nitrate sampling on private wells and installed monitoring wells downstream of some ag fields to determine the sources of the problem and to track the extent of contamination in the aquifer. This early research helped to establish a database for surface and groundwater quality in Portage and some surrounding counties, and revealed extensive contamination, nitrate contamination in groundwater that could affect the health of citizens relying on private wells for their source of drinking water. At about this time, the new College of Natural Resources building was completed, which had a much larger laboratory space for the ETF and included more sophisticated analytical equipment. The ETF supported both soil and water teaching programs in the College of Natural Resources while continuing with Byron's research. And Byron was a careful researcher who made sure he had solid data on which to draw his conclusions. To help ensure the credibility of data, he directed the lab to pursue certification under a variety of state and federal agencies. This had the added advantage of allowing the lab to work on research grants that required certification and the high level of documentation and quality control they mandated. Soon after, the Portage County Health Department closed their small water testing lab and adopted the ETF to analyze private well water for bacteria, nitrate, and other constituents. The College of Natural Resources was able to provide only partial support for the ETF program. So Byron tirelessly worked writing grants to obtain funding to support graduate research, lab personnel, and procure sophisticated instrumentation needed to meet lower detection limits, increased sample volume, and new sources of pollution. He did this on top of his many other responsibilities. The number of research papers that Byron authored or co-authored is too extensive to list here, much less discussed in any detail. But a few stand out in my mind that will illustrate the width and breadth of the research that Byron did. In 1974, the EPA-funded Big Old Plain Reservoir and Watershed Modeling Study was initiated. It was one of the first large-scale studies in the nation to use computer modeling and concluded that fish kills in a reservoir were the result of eutrophication caused by agricultural runoff in the watershed. In 1980, Byron and his graduate students found the pesticide eldecarb in Portage County groundwater. Byron was the first in Wisconsin and one of the first in the nation to show that the pesticide, a strong neurotoxin, could leach from potato fields into the aquifer and contaminate private wells. This discovery was initially met with skepticism, but later confirmed by the DNR. Byron's work resulted in Wisconsin's groundwater law in 1984. Eldecarb use was restricted in Wisconsin and later pulled from the market by Union Carbide. Byron also explored acid precipitation in Wisconsin and found it represented a potential hazard to poorly buffered lakes in the state. In 1987, a study of subdivision impacts on groundwater quality was initiated. This study found that septic systems leached significant levels of nitrate and other contaminants into the groundwater. This research resulted in changes to zoning regulations and public policy. It's important to note that Byron didn't do all his research in a vacuum. He was a gifted scientist with great foresight and intuition, but he also had a knack for putting together coalitions and working with people. He would partner with university and UW Extension colleagues, students, state and county agencies, and citizen scientists, to name a few. And with all his awards and accomplishments, Byron treated everyone with humility and respect and communicated information without talking down to people. Byron's time was valuable, but he was always willing to talk with people who had problems with their water or other environmental concerns. And I know that Byron is also a wonderful person to work for. He valued the judgment and skill of lab staff and graduate students and made decisions based on dialogue and consultation. He expected staff to work hard and produce quality results, and he set a perfect example to follow. Byron also liked to have fun. He and Margaret held many great laboratory parties out at their farm. These were usually potluck affairs with Byron and Margaret supplying most of the food and entertainment. And whether he was playing volleyball or just talking with people, Byron was just one of the gang having a good time. You might think that with all his research, academic responsibilities, and extension work, Byron wouldn't have time for anything else, but you'd be wrong. He enjoyed family time, canoeing, camping, traveling, windsurfing, cross-country skiing, hunting, fishing, gardening, making wine, managing his woodlot, and establishing a tall grass prairie. He was also a gifted woodcarver and fine craftsman, turning wood bowls, carving birds and animals, making cedar strip canoes and paddles. And the list could go on. He was a remarkable person. And there's no doubt that Wisconsin and its citizens are better off because of his research and dedication to environmental health. I'm grateful that Byron will be standing shoulder to shoulders with other inductees in the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dick, for that presentation. Now I'd like to introduce you to our second speaker for Byron Shaw, Chris Mechanic. Chris is a colleague and friend of Byron's who was the first groundwater educator at the Central Wisconsin Groundwater Center at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to everyone who had a role in Byron being honored and celebrated today. I would especially like to acknowledge the Shaw family for all the work that they did. Without their help, this nomination could not have been successful. Byron Shaw was a visionary scientist and educator. He was my graduate advisor and my mentor. He was also my colleague and my dear friend. Byron's career was dedicated to the Wisconsin idea, the idea that the knowledge and discoveries of the university should be useful to everyone in Wisconsin in their own homes and communities. In fact, in 1993, Byron received a Wisconsin Idea Award in Natural Resource Policy from UW-Madison for his applied research and his influence on public policy. In 1978, I became one of Byron's grad students, and I got to see firsthand his interest in conducting applied research to solve real-world problems. I never doubted that the work I was doing was meaningful and important. As a graduate advisor, Byron was not a micromanager. He expected a lot of problem solving and initiative. I will always be grateful to Byron for seeing what I was capable of doing even before I did. That faith and inspiration led me to a long and happy career in water education and protection. I became Byron's colleague in 1986, shortly after he obtained funding with the help of university colleagues and state legislators to start the Central Wisconsin Groundwater Center at UWSP, and it was part of University Extension. In our drinking water education programs, we worked with county extension faculty to offer residents in a small area, usually a town, the opportunity to take a test from their private well on a given day. And then the samples went to the Environmental Task Force lab to be tested. About a month later, Byron and I would go to a meeting place somewhere in that town, return the results, and present an education program. So in this way, we combined applied research with outreach to foster people's personal interest in their drinking water and also in groundwater protection for their whole community. Byron was visionary when it came to this program. He saw first that the precise location of these samples was important. And he realized that showing those results on a map would be a powerful educational tool that would engage people. In the days before desktop personal computers were common, we sometimes had to be creative to make Byron's vision come to life. We also asked about the depth of the well, so we got the three-dimensional picture of groundwater. And then Byron realized that this data was also important in the fourth dimension, which is time. So he started collecting all the results in a database. And the first database was a set of salmon-colored cards that were filled out for each test at the lab and stored in a cardboard box. Eventually, all that data became the online Wisconsin Well Water Quality Viewer, which is used by everyone from homeowners to state agencies and beyond. One of my favorite memories of Byron is that after working in the office all day, traveling several hours by car, and participating in a 2-hour education program. Byron would talk one-on-one to people who had questions about their water test results for as long as it took to get everyone's questions answered. He cared about those people. He talked to them at their level, and he let them know that their concerns and they themselves were important to him. No matter how long it took or what the weather was like outside, we stayed until every last person was gone. The chairs were put away if need be, and the lights were turned out. Then we made that long drive back home in the dark, and he was in his office again first thing in the morning. Now, Byron was humble. He would be the first to tell you that he didn't achieve all of his accomplishments alone. He attracted hardworking grad students and staff to help with his research and outreach. And he was the kind of person that people in the university, at state agencies, and beyond wanted to collaborate with. I believe that's because he was interested in the mission at hand and not who got the credit for it. And I think that inspired other people to be generous and collaborative as well. In the early 1990s, Wisconsin became recognized as a national leader in groundwater research, legislation, and education. And Byron was an important member of a very collegial team that was responsible for that. Byron continued to work on environmental issues during his retirement, especially serving as an expert witness in legal cases related to agriculture and water quality. One notable legal case was in Washington state, and it involved a huge dairy operation that was called Cow Palace. According to the lead attorney, Byron's work was instrumental in the judge's finding, which was the first of its kind in the country, that, quote, manure from industrial dairies, when mishandled as it was at Cow Palace, is a solid waste that is causing an immediate threat to human health, end quote. Margaret said that Byron was proud of that emphatic statement that was based on the evidence, perhaps especially so after all his years of work that some people questioned or doubted when he was ahead of his time. On some of those late night drives back from the drinking water education programs, Byron and I talked about, when we're old and in our rocking chairs, what are we going to find out we were wrong about? And that seems almost inevitable, doesn't it? Because science advances and changes and there are new discoveries. But I still haven't found that thing that Byron was wrong about. The work he did through his long career has really stood the test of time. Byron inspired people with his tenacity, his generosity, his holistic thinking, and his intelligence. He especially loved his family and their farm, but also he had many, many friends, and he loved the natural world, and I believe the people whose lives he made better. He really did change the world. That is why we're honoring him today with his induction into the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. My final thought is that when I admitted to Patty Dreyer that I was a little nervous about trying to represent Byron well in a short period of time, she said to me, "You will honor Byron's courage with your own." And that really inspired me. And I think that's something that we all can do. We can honor Byron's courage with our own by standing up for what is true and what is just, and by persevering even when there are obstacles. And in that way, we can all help carry Byron's legacy into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Foundation, we officially recognize Byron Herbert Shaw as being inducted into the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. The quote on the plaque that will be posted on our website reads, "What we do above ground affects what is below ground." To protect the health and well-being of our citizens, we should be concerned about contaminants into our drinking water. That's a quote by Byron Herbert Shaw. Byron is now a member of this exceptional group of conservation heroes in our state. You live forever in our hearts, Byron. We will now hear remarks from State Representative Katrina Shanklin, who will share a State of Wisconsin recognition.
This is State Representative Katrina Shanklin with a citation of commendation from the state of Wisconsin. Know you by these presents. Whereas, as a lifelong resident of Wisconsin, Byron Herbert Shaw developed an appreciation for the outdoors early in life through hunting, fishing, trapping, and raising trees with his father in Waunakee, Wisconsin, eventually inspiring him to become Waunakee's first Eagle Scout. And whereas, Byron furthered his passion for nature by earning a BS and MS in soil science and a PhD in soil science with a minor in water chemistry from UW-Madison in 1968, where he also met his wife, Margaret. And whereas, as a professor of soil and water science in the College of Natural Resources at UW-Stevens Point for 32 years, Dr. Shaw trained students as water chemists, supported student research, and established the Environmental Task Force Laboratory, now known as the Water Environmental Analysis Lab, to address soil and water quality issues. And in 1977, Byron became a water resource specialist with UW Extension, traveling across Wisconsin to educate community members about well water quality and lake management. And whereas, he made many scientific discoveries in his career, including being among the first in the nation to recognize that pesticides could leach through soil to contaminate groundwater, being the first to find acid rain and acid snow in Wisconsin, and pioneering one of the first major agricultural watershed and reservoir modeling efforts in the nation. And whereas, Dr. Shaw's discoveries and contributions greatly influenced public policy and law in Wisconsin, including Wisconsin's Groundwater Protection Law of 1984, a model for the nation. And alongside his academic achievements, Byron was an innovative and progressive farmer, transforming 52 acres of his farm to native prairie to provide pollinator habitats and improve water quality. And he was also a skilled woodworker, building cedar strip canoes to raise money for environmental causes. And whereas, he was an influential conservationist, educator, and researcher who demonstrated his commitment to conservation efforts well after retirement by working as a soil and water consultant for 15 years and testifying in precedent-setting water quality cases nationwide. And whereas, Dr. Byron Shaw has received many awards for his accomplishments, including the Wisconsin Idea Award, the first Distinguished Service Award from the Wisconsin chapter of the American Water Resources Association, and most recently has been named a 2023 inductee into the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. Now therefore, the members of the Wisconsin State Legislature, on the motion of Representative Katrina Shanklin, do hereby honor Dr. Byron H. Shaw for his outstanding service and commitment to conservation and recognize his lasting legacy of persistent, perceptive, and courageous leadership and dedication to environmental stewardship.
Hello, everyone. We are now live with the ceremony today on April 25th, 2023. And we are so glad that you have joined us. And we really want to reach out and congratulate Byron Shaw's family one more time on induction into the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. We know that Byron is near to our heart, and we want to welcome Byron's wife, Margaret Shaw, and their two sons, Jeff and Dan, who will join us now from the Shaw family farm in Amherst Junction, Wisconsin. Hello, we know that everybody wants to hear from you today for sure. And I think the first question, yep. So I think the first question for you, Margaret, if Byron was here today, knowing that he was being inducted into the the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame, what would he say?
Well, first, he would be very surprised because I don't think he ever thought about being into the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame, a goal in his life. But of course, he would be deeply honored. And the first thing he would say is that he wasn't alone in his efforts, He would want to give credit to all those that he worked with. He would say that working with these people was his own reward. And then would be happy bringing the people together to share in their successes and supporting each other and addressing ongoing environmental needs. He would love to have reconnected with everyone here that's watching. He would be glad that it's shining light on the importance of conservation and hopefully inspire young people to get involved. And then, of course, he would want our family to say thank you. He'd want to thank the board of directors from the Hall of Fame for their mission in advancing conservation legacy in Wisconsin, and the board of governors and the representatives who recognized and valued his contributions and for all the work that they are doing in Wisconsin. And Patty, we would like to thank you personally and your staff for supporting us and guiding our family throughout this past year, because it's been a long time and a lot of work. And of course, we want to invite to congratulate and thank the nominating committee for starting this ball rolling. They have contributed a great deal. And we also want to thank all of those people that wrote letters of support for the nomination papers.
Certainly a lot goes into this. There is no denying that for sure. But most of all, let's focus on Byron's early life. You know, yes, okay, there's a little bit of information in that video, but Margaret, where do you think that his core interest in conservation began?
Well, it definitely began in his early childhood. Those early childhood years are really important. And he just enjoyed the outdoors, doing everything outdoors. And you saw that one picture of him with a squirrel. And I'm wondering how he ever got a squirrel to sit on his lap. And Patty mentioned that he hunted and fished and trapped, planted trees, and camping was important to their family. But also important, living in a small town in Waunakee at that early age, he was free to explore all the natural spaces in and around Waunakee. And he would go with his friends down to the 6 Mile Creek, I believe it's called, that runs through Waunakee, and they'd fish there. He was active in Boy Scouting, and also it's been mentioned that he earned the first Eagle Scout Award in Waunakee. So he was greatly influenced by his parents. They were scout leaders, and they were active in other organizations. They taught him really important values. They taught him to work and speak on behalf of others in the community and beyond one's own self-interest. His early life helped him develop the whys, why he cares, why he does what he does, and why it was important to respect all things in nature. It's interesting, when I did a little research, I found his high school yearbook. And in his high school yearbook, he wrote, "You can have the girls, I'll take the outdoors." Well, I smile at this because we were married 6 years later. I met Byron in college. He was starting to work on his PhD project, and I still had 1 year of college left myself. So his all of his care for the outdoors has been portrayed throughout his life, in his career and in his hobbies and in his interests. He said he would show me a different way to live, and I've been enjoying a different way to live for over 50 years now.
And having gone to visit you at the farm, I can definitely see and feel that. So in the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame, we really love to draw some connections and highlight the connections between inductees. And so during his lifetime, Byron had crossed paths with many inductees into the Hall of Fame, including Dr. Wild, 1994 inductee. And I know we mentioned some of this in the tribute video, but Dr. Wild mentored Byron, and you also had a chance to know this professor. And I wonder if you could talk a little about that relationship and what impact you saw that Dr. Wild had on Byron.
Well, Dr. Wild came to the United States in 1929 from Russia. He was a very well-renowned person. He had a very important role to play. There were students that came from other universities in other countries just to work under him. And he joined the UW-Madison Soils Department in 1934. And he was known for his pioneering forest soils research. He had lots of interests. Besides being a scientist and professor, he was a translator. He was a musician, and I read that he played his violin in school during the noon hours. He published several textbooks and many scientific papers. And I just will show you that let's see if I can bring this up. This is his forest soils textbook from Dr. Wild. And this is just lots of technical information in there. I think that textbook was used for many years and is probably still used as research. Byron was very pleased that he was being mentored by Dr. Wild, and he was also his advisor. He admired him for his talents, his knowledge of the natural world, his research, and his foresight. He taught him basic knowledge of soil and water science, and that all natural things are interrelated. He helped Byron develop the how to do research, how to do collaboration, and how to find balance in his life and career. And I noticed as I was looking up Dr. Wild's information on the Hall of Fame website, I noticed a similarity between Byron and Dr. Wild's quotes. So I'm going to tell you what those were. Dr. Wild said, "An understanding of the forest lies just as much below the ground as above ground." And Byron's quote reads, "What we do above ground affects what is below ground." And I wonder how that happened.
A synchronicity for sure out there. Lovely. So Jeff, I wonder if you could share with us something about the factors that you believe led to Byron's success.
Sure. Yeah, there is so many things that we've heard of, earlier in the presentation that he was successful in. But I think many of those were for some of the same reasons, and they had to do with relationships, understanding natural relationships, and building human relationships. So first, as a trained chemist, he understood the foundation of the natural world, at an elemental level, and in a way that not everybody appreciates or sees. It's kind of hard to visually see that, but he understood the relationships between soils and water and animals and species, and that helped him to understand and predict some environmental problems and to explain it to other people as well. So I think that was a big part of it. But then as far as relationships from a social perspective, he had a very similar approach to that. I think he understood that natural systems and communities are interconnected, with species having their own functions, and that's much how human communities work too. He recognized the value and knowledge and expertise that other individuals have, and he built on that. He really, I think, focused on engaging others and helping them be successful. And that might explain why he became an educator. I think that's just kind of the person that he was. And he would be the first, as we've heard already, to credit other people for the successes that he has shared in. There's been so many great people that he's worked with. To some extent, he might have been kind of lucky in that regard. We heard from Chris and Dick today as two of those people. Was it just luck that he happened upon them? I think it was probably more than that. He really had an interest in building relationships and engaging with people. So those were some very important factors. And then too, I think his approach and how he focused on facts. He was truthful. He didn't embellish what he learned. And that really helped, especially later in his career, after he retired as a consultant, providing expert testimony. That was something that was valued and kind of hard to find to some extent too. So I know that the lawyers that he worked with very much appreciated that. I can't say that in retirement, being cross-examined and providing depositions is something that I would find fun. And I'm not sure if he did or not too, but he certainly thought it was important. He kind of stepped up and wanted to do that. So that's probably not the complete picture, but I think those are some of the more important factors that contributed to his success.
And a nice segue, I think, when we talk about the courage that it took to stand up on the matters that Byron stood up on. So Margaret, because you're closest to him, I think there's no denying that. Will you tell us about a time, kind of following up on what Chris said in her presentation today, can you tell us about a time when you got a sense of the courage that it took for Byron to be a scientist on the frontier of discovery, the way he was, and how he dealt with that challenge of leadership?
Just to have a little background, I mentioned that he was influenced by his scouting experience, and that helped him to build character and gave him direction, drive, and then also courage. And he received 2 letters of congratulations when he received his award. And one was from Representative Robert Kastenmeier, and another was from Joseph Brunton Jr., who was the Chief Scout Executive. And I'd like to just read something that was in this letter. And I think it was very motivating for Byron. More than ever before, we need men of courage and judgment and of understanding in the things they believe to stand up and be counted. I am sure that you will continue to live in such a way that our country will be stronger because of what you believe and are willing to do. And that's really touching to me, because I think that's what Byron did in his life. He lived in such a way that our country was stronger, and he believed and did what he was willing to do. And now Dick Stevens mentioned the reference to pesticides being discovered in central Wisconsin. Well, that put Byron in the spotlight, and it might be what you'd call an inconvenient truth, because it wasn't something that people wanted to hear. But he believed in himself and his science knowledge, and he had confidence in his lab staff. He had the determination to persevere with his goal of working on behalf of citizens. And then he drew on his values. He knew he needed to act, to do the right thing, and to inform the public. He didn't just dwell on the problem and worry about it. He just got to work on it. He dealt with that challenge by being calm, at least trying to be calm, and trying not to be defensive. He gained the support of colleagues and the university administrators. That was exceptionally important. He was really good at sticking to the facts, so he took steps to show people that questioned his research, that his data was correct. And that involved a lot of education and collaboration, and we've talked a lot about collaboration today. He kept balance in his life and lowered his stress by participating in activities that he enjoyed.
Which helps me lead to the question I want to ask Dan. Dan, we know that Byron had a lot of influence on a lot of folks out in the wider community and so on, but also family and friends. And I'd like you to talk to that, if you don't mind, please.
I think he influenced us in many ways, and including family, friends, and coworkers. I think part of his influence was just his enthusiasm for life and the environment. He just, he had a charisma to himself. He really wanted to keep learning. That was really important to him, to keep learning through his whole life. And he kept finding new interests. He demonstrated that by his many hobbies. I think we added up about 30 different hobbies that he was involved in. So he was always busy, always learning. He taught us to keep exploring and pursue our own adventures, our own passions. So that was another really important lesson from him. He showed us the value of shared adventures and misadventures as well. And really taught us the importance of building a conservation community. That was something that was really important to him. Building that community, the farm became a place of learning. And there are many activities that happened at the farm. There were prescribed burns that the community participated in, workshops and other gatherings. And he really taught us what perseverance and determination can accomplish. He influenced the conservation careers of Jeff and myself and our direction and the work that we've done, and also influenced the next generation. My son wrote about his influence in his college essay. He said, "I continue to be inspired by my grandfather each day by his love of and devotion of the outdoors, and much of my own appreciation for nature comes from what he taught me." So he definitely had an influence on us in many ways.
Lovely. Absolutely lovely. I love that story about your son's, the ripple effect of Byron through your next generation. So Margaret, when we look at Byron's story, certainly a rich and deep one, what do you think made him the proudest?
Well, I think he would say, first of all, that he was so proud of his boys, Jeff and Dan. They both work for the state, Dan, the state of Minnesota, and Jeffrey, the state of Wisconsin in agencies. So that was important. And then he was also extremely proud of all the students that he worked with and that he mentored and what they have gone on to achieve. And, Byron was an optimist. He was a realist also, but he was really hopeful, and he believed that the students that he had mentored were going to go on and make a difference in the world. He was disappointed. He kept thinking that that he could have accomplished more, so that he had a lot of confidence in those students. And he was also glad that he could help individuals become knowledgeable so that they could be engaged and care for their own resources. That was another item that was so important to him, and to be working with the public and citizens also. So he was also glad that he could help out the agencies, the county boards, the legislature, and the courts, helping them make decisions regarding public policy. And the groundwater law was an example of this.
Why some of us call Byron Shaw the grandfather of groundwater, very affectionately. So Jeff, let's talk about the impact that Byron had on the conservation community as a whole and Wisconsin's conservation legacy. What would you say about that?
Sure, it was certainly significant. Community is in large part, about what he was, about. And I think that impact on the community was equal in measure to the impact that it had on him. That's kind of how relationships work, and he had a strong relationship with a lot of people. And over the years, he brought so many great people into my life too. It's had a profound influence just knowing those people. So I had some notion of what his impact was in the conservation community, but honestly, it really wasn't until his passing that I fully appreciated that. I had lived here, heard a lot about what was going on, was fairly close to a lot of that, but then having moved away, wasn't as in tune with it until he had passed away. And then hearing the sentiment shared by literally hundreds of people, it was a little bit overwhelming almost. So he had that influence pretty far and wide. So what was that impact? Well, and why? I think he was part of the foundation of a community of people that really looked to him because he was a trusted source of information. He was a confidant. He really focused on enabling and helping other people be successful themselves. So you always kind of felt that he had your back. He was there. And then, when he wasn't, that had a pretty profound impact on a lot of people. And I've had people tell me that as well. And, I and others have really just tried to figure out, why was that impact so profound? It's just kind of hard to get your arms around that, really. But one story, I was talking to a lawyer who had actually cross-examined him, and she was saying how much she valued the fact that and was rather surprised by how patient, how respectful, open and honest he was during that. And that's something that a lot of people sort of rely on. And, kind of valued, because many of us in the conservation community have to deal with conflict. They're contentious issues, and you need to have somebody have your back, especially when he's become political in some cases. So I think this individual really, even though she was representing somebody who might have been on the other side of the aisle, really helped that he appreciated that he was just laying out the facts so everybody could make the best decision possible. He didn't necessarily try to impose his own agenda there. But as far as his impact on the conservation legacy, as we heard, today, I think it was really about how he helped educate, inspire, and collaborate with other people, and to pass on the skills and methods that he initially learned from Dr. Wild and others early in his career and in school, and then the things that he learned throughout his career, sharing with those other people and building this larger sense of capability and collaboration with the community, I would say, is his probably greatest impact on the conservation legacy in Wisconsin. So yeah, I think that's
Thank you.
mostly what it was about.
So Dan, when we, I want to give this question over your direction. So when someone's inducted into the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame, we view them as a conservation champion. And our intention is to capture that story and then to share it as a means of hopefully inspiring others to step up, to challenge themselves and to say, I want to strive to be part of Wisconsin's conservation legacy too. So what would Byron say about stepping up and about those challenges? And do you think that he understood that he was advancing Wisconsin's conservation legacy?
Well, I think you would say that it takes a conservation community to really take on these challenges. We really need to support each other. My mom played a really important role for her, providing support, and that was really important to his work. And then also his amazing coworkers. He had many amazing coworkers that were supporting what he was doing and played a really important role. I think he would feel that both professionals and citizens can play a role in solving challenges. And he'd be really proud of citizens in Wisconsin that are currently leading on groundwater protection and stepping up. He would also say we all need to step up together. We need to support each other. And the more people that get involved, the more impact that we can have. With the Wisconsin conservation legacy, I think he knew that he was advancing that legacy, but mainly through collaboration with citizens, coworkers, and students who he was very proud of.
Back to the message of empowering individuals and communities with this information. So as we sum up here, Dan, maybe you could take this question too. What would Byron's advice be for young people who aspire to become conservationists?
We definitely have many conservation challenges to solve, and we need their involvement. I think to keep it simple, there's a few things that he would say to young people. First, explore the outdoors and share those experiences with others. Learn from nature, build your community, find your passion, find mentors, enjoy life, and then also stand up for what you care about and know that you can make a difference.
Well, thank you, all of you today. This has really helped us get to know Byron even better. Many of us have already held him in our hearts, but you help us dig a little deeper here today to understand and perhaps find new ways to model his courage and his vision in the way that we go forward in our state and in the greater world. So thank you for joining us today. We want you to be able to get to those friends of yours waiting over there at the Central Wisconsin Environmental Station for a watch party, waiting to greet you today. Thank you.
Patty.
So indeed, everybody, Byron's difference continues to flow through us today. As we are about to bring the end of this ceremony today, I want you to know that we have enabled or are about to enable the chat feature so that you can share some messages, some memories with the Shaw family. We'll we'll prepare a transcript of notes of anything that's put in the chat today so that the Shaw family won't miss any of your sentiments. We'll hold the chat open for about 5 minutes. And if you're at a watch party, say at UW-Stevens Point or SWES or somewhere else, and you can't send your individual congrats in the next day or two, if you go to our website, you can contact us through WCHF.org, and we'll go ahead and add those sentiments to the package that we send the family. A recording of this event will be available on the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame website, so it can be viewed for decades to come to continue to share the legacy of Byron Herbert Shaw. Please invite others who weren't able to join us today to view this online tribute later. And if you'd like to make a donation in honor of Byron Shaw, please visit our website for that as well. Just click on the join/donate button, and that will help us continue to share the story of Byron far and wide across the land, but also the stories of other inductees with an even wider audience as we continue our mission of celebrating, advancing, and sharing Wisconsin's conservation legacy through the stories of our conservation heroes. Again, we want to thank our sponsors of this event. At the double platinum level, we have Helen Johnson Leopold and Craig Leopold. Platinum sponsors include Trout Unlimited, United States Forest Service in the Department of Agriculture, the David H. Smith Conservation Research Fellowship Program, otherwise known as Smith Fellows. The Aldo Leopold Foundation is a silver sponsor, along with Ice Age Trail Alliance, Joanne M. and Richard C. Hemp, Stephen Bourne, Madison Audubon, Friends of Wisconsin Ducks Unlimited, Tim and Linda Isley, Kathleen Falk and Peter Bach, the Columbia Marquette chapter of Pheasants Forever, Inc. in Wisconsin. And then bronze sponsors include Peter McKeever, Door County Land Trust, Todd Ames, Paul DeLong, Wisconsin Society for Ornithology, Brent Haglund, Tom and Mary John Hauge, Wisconsin Wildlife Federation, and Society of American Foresters. Our in-kind contributions come from the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point. As you tap your thoughts into the chat, there's a special message that we received at our office, and I would like to read that one right before we wrap up this ceremony. It comes with a picture. All right. This message comes from Tommy Miller and Crystal River in Wapaka. Kudos for Shaw. This is a picture of a handmade canoe by Byron Shaw in the early 2000s. And his message reads this way: Byron was a peer colleague of mine at UW-Stevens Point. Our relationship evolved into friendship, mentor, and fellow conservation activist. As former chair of the River Alliance in Wisconsin many years ago, I urged Byron to consider joining our board of directors. Both of us with a love for rivers and lakes and the proper stewardship of surface and groundwater. I miss Byron very much. This world needs many more conservation champions like him. Hugs to my dear friends Margaret and Zoe Shaw. That again was from Tom Miller, Crystal River in Wapaka. Well, we've come to a close on this induction ceremony. The video tribute for conservation champion Byron Shaw will play twice through, and we thank you for joining us.